Go. Episode 145, Religious Trauma with Leah Davidson. Hello, my beautiful friends. I am so happy to have you back. I am really excited because we have one of my favorite humans with us today, Leah Davidson. And she's actually back for a second time. And she is so amazing. And I know that you are going to love, love, love what she has to say because she's got some good, good stuff. So, welcome back, Leah. I'm so happy you're
Thank
here.
you. I'm so happy to be here too, and I love you just as much. So I'm glad we're in good company here.
Yes, great. It'll be great fun. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you. I want to hear a little bit about you. Well, I know a lot about you, but tell my listeners a little bit about you personally and then also your what you do professionally.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm Leah Davidson, and I'll do professional first because I think it's less important than the personal. But professionally, I am a coach. Nervous system resilience is my jam. I love talking all things nervous system. I am also a speech language pathologist, and that is where I got my beginnings, all things brain, nervous system, neuroplasticity, trauma as I work with people who have experienced traumatic brain injuries. I also have a membership about the nervous system. I just created a journal, guided journal to help people with mental health and nervous system resilience. So, nervous system is what you're going to keep hearing me repeat. I am
Got my
married to a
journal
man.
right here. Love it.
Awesome. There you go. I'm married to a man who has an incredible nervous system as well. And we have five adult children who also have nervous systems, and some of them partners. And so it is a lot going on. We are a blended family, so there's always been different dynamics to contend with over the years. I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, so I'm your Canadian friend. I want you to come visit up in Canada.
I'm in.
Um, yeah, yeah. And I am also LDS. I've been born and raised in LDS. In Montreal is actually where I'm from. So it was a different experience growing up in a religious environment back then. It's certainly a different experience raising my family in a religious background and then being parents to adult children, uh, many who have left the faith, a couple who have remained, and loving it all and experiencing all the ups and downs and joys of parenting and family life and all those good things.
All the stuff. All the
All the
stuff.
stuff. All the stuff. Yes.
Okay, is there something that most people don't know about you, like a little nugget? What's something unique that we don't know?
Oh boy, you put me on the spot for that. Something that people don't know about me. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty open book, but one fun thing is I got divorced like I guess 18 years ago, and I probably survived on Fruit Loops for the first few months. I love Fruit Loops. I was traumatized by Fruit Loops because I overdid them, and I recently have made a comeback to Fruit Loops. It's my favorite junk go-to cereal, and I'm also a huge raving fan of Canadian chocolate milk, not
Mm.
American, no offense to y'all, but Canadian chocolate milk is yummy. And poutine, which, if
Mm.
people know me, they know I have a passion for poutine. I have strict instructions that when I die at my reception, we will be serving poutine.
Well, when I come
So
visit
that's
you in
a little
Canada,
weird thing.
we'll have to go get chocolate milk, Canadian chocolate milk and poutine. Love
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
Yes. Do the Fruit Loops tear up the roof of your mouth?
You know, they did back then. I just didn't realize that's what was happening. I thought it
Yeah.
was just divorce symptoms, but yeah, it was Fruit Loop symptoms. Yeah.
Yes. Some of those too. Okay, good to
Yeah,
know
yeah.
about the those fun little things. Um, my favorite cereal is Honey Nut Cheerios. So just so you know, we could
Oh,
have a
yeah,
bowl of
they're good.
cereal together.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, so what I want to talk about is religious trauma. When
Hmm.
you have a loved one in this space with mixed faith relationships, sometimes you'll hear a loved one say, I have been traumatized. I've experienced religious trauma. And
Mm,
as a parent, as a spouse, as a human, that it's hard for the person that went through that is experiencing the religious trauma. It's also hard to be a person that hears that and like how to handle that. So I want to pick your brain all about that. So what is religious trauma, first of all? And the second question, is it different than regular trauma? Is that even a term?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think we can start with like trauma is not an event. It is what happens to somebody as the result of something that their nervous system did not have the capacity to handle, which is why you can see people may experience the same events, which could be labeled in our society as traumatic, but not experience trauma. Like there are certain things we call them big T and little t traumas. This is commonly talked about, although I'm not sure it's the best way of describing trauma. But big T trauma are sort of the things that you would expect to be traumatic: an accident, an earthquake, sexual abuse, or any other kind of abuse. They're kind of the things that we all sort of nod in agreement, like, yes, this is traumatic. Um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person will experience trauma. That I work with people who have car accidents, experienced traumatic brain injuries, um, but won't necessarily experience PTSD, regardless of the severity of their accident. And yet, some people who have quote unquote milder accidents will experience PTSD. So, what we know is that your experience of trauma has a lot to do with your own nervous system and the capacity your nervous system has to withstand and sustain events. And then there's something called small t trauma, which these are just smaller things that for some nervous systems, they don't have the capacity to manage, or they're sort of these smaller events, like chronic things along the way, which have impacted somebody, their insides. So that's sort of like when we look at trauma, it is the event, what happens to the person. Now, religious trauma is often, it describes really when a person's religious experience, whether that be through their doctrine or their community or their personal beliefs or the environment, they have stress because of it, whether it be psychological or physiological stress because of it. And again, very dependent on their nervous system, which is why you will see some people talk about religious trauma versus other people may be saying, like, what are you talking about? It's not necessarily that they have different definitions, but the impact on their nervous system would have been different. And I look at when we talk about like somebody's nervous system, it's like their infrastructure. Like, how is your nervous system built? And the example I'll give you, I just was out talking with neighbors. I live in Toronto. We've just had a massive couple of weeks of snowstorms. And Toronto does not have the capacity to handle the snow. Like, it really doesn't. They don't clear the streets. So we've got like snow piles and it's melting and freezing, and you can't really walk on the sidewalks. It's a disaster. Where I'm from, Montreal, Montreal has an infrastructure that has the capacity to handle snow. Like,
Hmm.
we had lots of snow throughout our lives. And where I grew up, like, we had very quick service. I used to live in downtown Toronto. There'd be signs on the street that would say, don't park your car here during these hours. And the snowplow would come, and then we'd shift sides and the snowplow, and the snow would be cleared away. Toronto doesn't have that capacity. We have different capacities. We're prepared for different things. Our nervous systems are like city infrastructures. And so some people will experience trauma because of also how their nervous system is. Now, I'm not saying that there's no contributing factors, but that is why we also experience things differently. Our nervous systems experiencing things differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, so I'm in Leah's advanced nervous system training right now that is amazing. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating that you shared is how our nervous systems are as unique as our fingerprint based off of genetics, mental illness, situations, our religious beliefs and
Yeah.
backgrounds, and all of those things are going to look very different from person to person. So I think that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. And
so
that's why you
fascinating.
never want to discredit if somebody says they've experienced religious trauma. I'm never going to say to them, no, you didn't, because their experience is their experience. At the same time, if I say I haven't experienced religious trauma, my experience is still valid too,
Yeah.
because we have different experiences. Not only do we have different experiences, like even within cultures, within religions, within family, within like who were your leaders, your teachers, the environment. Like I grew up in Montreal, very different dynamic religious wise than say if you grew up in a different part of the States. But it's also my infrastructure. It's also so somebody saying they've experienced religious trauma versus somebody saying that they didn't experience religious trauma doesn't invalidate each other. And I think sometimes we have this like, well, if one person experienced it, it must be factual. But just like a car accident doesn't necessarily cause PTSD, it's the experience of the person who has had that injury.
And I think another, as you were speaking, another thing, when someone tells you they've experienced trauma, I think as a parent or maybe as a partner, it would be easy to make those words mean that I did this to you. Whereas
Right.
that could be a part of it because our caregivers and our family
Mhm.
of origin, that definitely influences our
Yeah,
experiences. And that could also just be like, I think the big thing about trauma is someone is saying, my body does not feel safe in this situation
exactly.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's,
That's it. Our nervous system is constantly scanning for safety and danger. But what we recognize as safety and danger is very individual. Like there are some things that are um, dangerous per se, like sort of true danger.
mhm,
But more often than not, things are our interpretation of things. So our nervous system can scan and find safety where somebody else will find danger, and will find danger where somebody else will find safety. And we have different levels of sensitivity. Often we're often born with different levels of sensitivity, which is why for some people, yeah, it may feel this does not feel safe to me. I just think it's important we don't invalidate the experience on either side, because I've seen it happen on both
mhm.
sides where people are sort of like, oh, it's all religion is religious trauma. Okay, okay. But that's just as invalidating as me saying that there's no such thing as religious trauma. Like there's both. We can experience both. Often it's our own unique experience, it's our own unique interpretation. It could be the actual experiences of, like I said, the people, the environment. They all contribute, and our infrastructure plays a role as well.
Yeah. So interesting. And I think it's interesting because, like, for me, church is my happy place where I feel
Right.
peaceful and safe. And so I think
Hmm.
it can be really tricky when you're in a mixed faith relationship to be like, wait a minute, this is
Yeah.
how could something so peaceful and grounding be so hard and traumatizing? So having that,
Yeah.
I think having that lens is so important, recognizing it may not, it's not the event, it's the nervous system that's coming into this and
Yeah.
the different, my experiences look very different than my husband's or my kids. And
Mm.
so it's so important to
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah. And then it's also important to know that in general, we all will at some point struggle with our faith, whether that be based on an organized religion or spirituality or a quest for finding, the universe or anything like that. Um, and we may transition from different beliefs. And transitioning is difficult. It's not necessarily traumatic for everybody. For some people, that experience may be traumatic, but not everybody who struggles with organized religion or everybody who struggles with faith transitions will experience religious trauma. So I think we have to be careful of those overgeneralizations in both directions. That just
Yeah,
because
true.
I may have a transition or I may struggle with certain things in my religion doesn't necessarily equate to trauma. And it doesn't necessarily equate to ignorance. Like, oh, you're just
Yeah.
ignorant that you're not seeing it. Well, my experience is different and it's just as valid as your experience. I never want to tell somebody, like, no, you're not experiencing it. That's not the way it was. That was how you experienced it. I say to people, like, it's the kind of the same thing as, well, just in general, feelings in general. Feelings are very, very real. They're very, very accurate, but they're not fact and they're not truth. And that's why things like trauma, we cannot label trauma is fact, this is trauma, because it's not. We see people go to war, we see people have accidents, we see people go through religious challenges, and it's trauma. And then we see people who go through all those things and they don't experience the trauma.
Yeah, so interesting. So, what are some of the common signs or symptoms that someone might uh, exhibit if they were experiencing religious trauma?
I think like a big piece of it is a feeling of being unsafe, a feeling of dis-ease, and that is something that the nervous system, and that becomes a tricky thing too, because our nervous system will always be scanning for safety and danger, and it picks up on cues based on our past patterns and our past predictions and our past experiences. So there's something called neuroception. And neuroception is this idea that we're constantly scanning our external cues, our internal cues, and constantly scanning what's going on between us. But so many things influence our neuroception that sometimes we can neurocept safety when it's actually dangerous. And sometimes we can neurocept danger when it's actually safe. So I think with the experience, that's why it's hard to argue with somebody. Like, this is their neuroception for whatever reason. And it may be like something they can trace back to. Oh, I know the reason. I actually was abused, or I actually, this happened. And other times it's sort of the interpretation. If we're in a constant state of dysregulation, we start to view the whole world as being dangerous. We
Hmm.
start to view like our interpretations of things, which is why sometimes people, even like you said, like some things will offer you peace and comfort, and other people was just like, oh, that just gave me the EBGBs. I don't feel safe with that. That's partly because of the lens that you're neurocepting through, that you will view things based on your past experience, based on your sensitivity level, based on what you have learned, what from other people, but like so many things shape it. So we can be looking at the same thing and see it from completely different perspectives, which is why sometimes our kids may come to us and say, like, this happened. And we're like, I totally don't see it that way. It's
Yeah.
not because we don't believe them. And it's not because we're calling them liars. And it's not because we're ignorant and we just missed it all. It's because we have different perspectives. We're seeing things through the lens of a different nervous system.
So interesting. So interesting. Uh, okay, so how might mixed faith relationships uniquely contribute or amplify feelings of religious trauma?
Well, I think that our experiences, like I said, very, very real to us, although they're not fact. So if one person decides to leave the faith or do something different, there can be this like, how can you not see it? How can you be so stupid to stay in the religion? How can you be so stupid to leave the religion? Because we're viewing things through a different lens. So I think that it becomes really important for us to be aware of our nervous system state. Sometimes it could be like, well, they're just not thinking properly. Well, it's not necessarily a cognitive thing. If somebody doesn't feel safe, we can't like reason our way out of it. And at the same time, if you're feeling safety, it's not because you lack cognitive, the
Yeah.
ability to cognitively make choices. So I think it becomes understanding the other person's perspective. It's not that somebody is broken or somebody is smarter than another person or somebody is more in tune. I do think it has a lot to do with our nervous system, but I think that that is also the gateway where we can bond again. Like
Hmm.
learning how to regulate our own nervous systems so that we can stay anchored in our own safety and get curious about the perspective of the other person. But it's hard because it does kind of require it on both sides. If you have somebody who is always attacking one way and the other person, it just means like the dance is going to be slower. If you have one person who's sort of regulated and welcoming curiosity and the other person who is attacking. In the ideal world, we're both regulated and curious and but that doesn't happen. So that's why there can be some extra, extra tension involved because I think people's faith is very fundamental. Like we know like this day and age, there's varying levels of faith. There's certainly varying levels of interest in organized religion. Like there's extremes in all ends. But I think the idea of faith, if we put it in terms of higher purpose, I think there's a lot more commonality around that than anything else. And when people have a faith, a higher purpose, a sense of belonging to something greater, they often, I know for sure when they look at the research around people getting better from injuries like a traumatic brain injury, faith plays an important role. Not necessarily religion, but faith plays an important role. And so I think that's where we need to find the common ground. What is your faith? And it may not be the same thing, but is there a faith in a greater commonality, a higher purpose of being and of living? I think that's where we find that commonality.
And I love that because, like, yeah, to recognize, like, for me, that's me connecting with a higher power is so, so important. And, like, for my husband, he loves to run. That's his, like, being
Yeah.
in nature,
Yeah.
that's where he connects. And,
Yeah.
and I do as well. And finding those
Oh, and
ways,
there's
but
multiple ways we can connect,
so
right? And
many.
and finding ways. I also think like we have different experiences throughout our life. And what I've learned as I'm getting older and older is not to be so set that this is the way it is and it's always going to be this way. I've watched my own faith come and go. Sometimes
Mhm.
I look at my adult children right now, and as I said, I was born and raised in the LDS church, and I think there's this assumption like you've just missed out on life because you've only had, this one religious experience. But there's been a lot of up and downs within that faith, and a lot of testing of different things, and a lot of expansion into other areas that are not of my faith per se, but of spirituality, of the
Mhm.
universe, of source, of nature, of all these things that I bring to the table. And I think that that changes as you get older, as you have different life experiences. I know that when I went through my divorce, it was a test of my faith in one way. When I lost my dad, it was a different experience of faith. When I was raising my kids, it was a different experience of faith. Now that my kids are older, it's a different experience of faith. And I expect that it is going to go up and down and in and out and I'll have different experiences. It is very fluid. And I want to be open to that fluidity. Like, what else do I have to learn?
Mhm.
What else can I experience?
I love that. And I think that's a beautiful thing that our family members that are no longer interested in the church, they can kind of show us, the things that are important to them and we can learn from them and connect with that. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so my next question. So we talk a lot about we want our nervous systems to feel safe, that we heal in safety, we heal in connection. So, what are some ways to create safety in our mixed faith relationships uh, when when we've got different levels of religious
Hmm.
trauma or not?
Yeah. I think a place we want to start with is safety is actually created within us. And we want to be careful that we're not giving our power away, that somebody else is responsible for creating safety for us. So the first question is always, how do I find safety within myself? And that requires your own work. There are things that others can do to help foster safety, environmental cues, body language, tones, just conversations. There are things other people to do, but essentially it is up to us to establish safety because it starts in our body and nobody can force you to have a body experience. So I think getting to start identifying, what does safety feel like in my body? Do I experience it? And for some people, like even that word, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. What does safety feel like in my body? So play around with it. What does it feel like to feel good in your body, or to feel okay, or to feel at ease, or to feel peaceful? And if you start to notice, it's very difficult for somebody else to make you feel that way. We do that through our thoughts, through our perspective, through allowing things. And so, yeah, safety within a mixed marriage, it 100% starts with you taking care of your own safety. If you're always pointing at, it's my partner or a parent or a child that needs to make me feel safe, it's going to be very hit and miss because we can't really control what other people experience. So working on your own safety. And it starts with literally just like, what does it feel like in my body? What feels good to me? What feels at ease? What feels okay? Who are the people I enjoy being around? Like, you said at the beginning, like we both admitted, like we both really love each other. There is some safety, but it's Chris doesn't make me feel safe. I access safety and I notice that when I'm with Chris, there is an increase of it, probably because of the cues that she's sending and moving forth. But if I've never felt safety, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to be able to help me get to safety.
I think that's so important to um, well, just a couple of my past episodes, we've talked about the safety sequence. We've talked about the things that when we can have our CEO online, when we're having conversations with loved ones that in our mixed faith relationships, we can't control what mode they may be in monkey mode. We can't control that.
Yeah,
But if we can show up with our CEO, that's where we're going to be able to have kindness and compassion and curiosity. We're going to be able to set boundaries if necessary, just focusing on what we can do to have our access to our CEO is that's
yeah,
what we want to focus on. And that's
exactly.
when we feel safe. That's when
Yeah,
it opens that door for the CEO to come out and
yeah,
be like, I'm
yeah,
here. I got this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really up to us. We are the creator of our experience. We are, yes, there are influences, but we are the creator of our experience. And because we are the creator of our experience, it may mean that we decide that some things we don't want in our life. And that may be different for other people. I
Mhm.
do get to create my experience, and that may mean a change of faith, a change of partner, a change of job, a change of whatever. But it is always in my control. I have the power to respond and to create. I am not, um, I don't want to live as I am a victim of my circumstances. Things may have happened to me that have been unjust, especially when we were younger, and it is not your fault and you don't have to take accountability for what happened when you were younger. And it could have been very, very damaging. And so we want to have compassion for the pain that your younger self experienced. But as you hit the age of adulthood, you are responsible for moving forward. You are responsible for creating things. You are responsible for finding the tools, making the decisions, setting the boundaries that will heal us. But we're not setting boundaries to keep, to blame people or to force people to do things. We're doing it so that we can create our own bubble of healing, so to speak.
And I love how you always say we heal
We
in that
heal.
safety, we heal in those
Yeah,
connections.
safety is healing. And that's why we have to but safety, like I said, it starts with you. And it's also like you're not going to have perfect safety. It's kind of like you got to be safe enough. And then you have to ask yourself, are you fueling the safety? Because I give this example in one of my podcast episodes. I talked about this idea of cultivating safety. And I said, say you say, I don't feel safe with a certain person. And then, so you already say, I don't feel safe with that person. And then you go off and you talk about that person with your friend, and you talk about another friend, I don't feel safe, I don't feel, and you give all these experiences. You are never going to feel safe with that person. You're like fueling that. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't, that you have to feel safe with everybody, but I'm saying, but be aware of what you're feeding, like what you water grows. So if you are always going to be watering, this is dangerous, this is bad, I mean, that you, it will fill you up. Whereas when we water, I want to cultivate safety. What are the things in my life that feel safer? And focus on those things. That's what's going to grow. It doesn't mean that we turn a blind eye and we're ignorant and we're like bad things happen. Life is filled with crappy things. But you do get to decide where you emphasize and invest, what effort you put in. You do get to decide that.
I love that. And that's probably the perfect spot to wrap this up. That, yeah, that we do. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Okay, where can people learn more about you if they want to hear more about what you offer? Where can they find you?
I am on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. I have a podcast called Building Resilience, so you
And
can
it's
find me
so
there.
good. So, so good.
Thank you. Thank you. I love it. I have a monthly membership called Connections. So on my website, you'll get all that Leah Davidson Life Coaching. And I have a journal that I just released. It's available on Amazon. You won't find it under my name, it's under my brand called Resilient Brilliance. And it is a mental health journal for emotional well being and nervous system care. And I'm super excited about it because it's the first in a line of stationary products for mental health that I am creating. And I hope to, bring nervous system awareness and health to as many people as possible. And so my journal is an attempt to share that.
Well, I have your journal and I just love it. And it is such an honor. When I started this journey, when I started your training, I thought, this is going to be so good for my clients. And it is. It's wonderful. But I had no idea how much my nervous system needed all this. And
Yeah.
so I just thank you from me personally, the work that
Oh,
you've helped me to do to heal my nervous system and how that's impacting my family, my husband, my kids, and my clients and their families. So thank you. I just love you.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that is everything that we've got for you today. Make a great week. Mwah.